This is my 1956 Chevrolet Handyman. It's a two-door station wagon, not a Nomad. In June of 2014, I converted the car to fuel injection using the F.A.S.T EFI fuel injection system. The kit that I ordered came with an external fuel pump, but I decided to convert it to an in-tank fuel pump. With this being a wagon, there was no conversion kit for the fuel tank for the wagons, so I had to convert my own. It actually turned out extremely well, and I used it up until just a few days ago. My floor jack was not centered correctly underneath the differential, and as I jacked it up, it slid off the back of the differential right into the gas tank, crushing the tank and the fuel pump inside. Well, the damage is done, but luckily they do make a new tank that is already set up for internal fuel pump. Tanks Inc. Makes the tank, and it's packaged and distributed by Holley or directly available from Tanks Inc. Holley puts together a package, and you can see it here, the Sniper EFI package fuel pump conversion. Well, you've seen all the damage, so now it's time to repair it. So the first thing we got to do with this new gas tank is measure the depth for the fuel sending unit and the fuel pump. So we're at 11.5 inches. So we've got our measurement of 11.5 inches. So we need to set up by the chart, so 11.5 inches. So we need a depth to the center post of the float of 5.75 inches. And for anything under 6 inches of depth, we need to take off this extension. There's an extension on this for the deeper tanks, and so we need to remove that, and we'll attach this directly to this for the shorter ones. What we're going to do is take out this extension, and we're going to put this directly in here, but we're going to have a little bit more slack in the sending unit wire, so I'm going to wrap that one more time around there. And we need to go to 5.75 inches on the depth from the base to the center. So we need to go to 5 3/4 inches to there. So where is that going to line up? And we'll double check this as we get the screws tightened down. Make sure that we're in the right spot. So we're almost tight. Double check our 5.5 or 5 3/4 of an inch. Five 3/4. Okay, so there's the depth for our float, and then we want the float depth, or the length of the float on here to be 7.4 inches. Yes, and I do find it very odd talking to myself or to a camera. It's just not something that I've ever been good at, so you'll just have to bear with me. Looks like we can go right to the center of that mold indentation in the float. Let me get some tension on this. Most likely don't need to be this precise, but I want to have my fuel gauge as accurate as possible, because that would be something very odd to actually have an accurate fuel gauge. Center to center, just a hair over 7 3/8. So we've got 7.4 on that. So this should be good. Now we just need to cut off the excess on the back of that, and we'll have our fuel gauge. Is a dimple on this, but I'm not sure where the dimple goes. Let's see how the holes line up. Are they uniform? They are not. Looks like one set of holes is slightly further apart than the rest. So it looks like it goes right there. Okay, take 2 on that, because I was trying to put the fuel sending, or the fuel sending unit float mechanism into the wrong hole. This one is going to go into this hole, and the fuel sending float's going to go over here. The reason I was mistaken is because in the traditional gas tank that I took out, the float was on this side, but this one fits into this corner here and goes in just like this, and the gasket only fits on one way, which perfectly aligns the float into the corner over here. Way up and all the way down. Perfect fit in there, so they've obviously designed this well. Okay, well, I've decided I'm going to see if I can get the camera inside the hole and show you where the float goes, because it's kind of interesting where it fits, and I'd like to see it anyway. We're going to try that one more time, see if we can get a better view. Well, now we need to figure out the depth of the fuel pump in the tank. So I need to measure for we already have the depth of the tank at 11.5 inches, but we need to measure for the fuel sock. That easy. There we go. Don't want to bottom that all the way out, but we do need to get that down there so we can get the height of that. So we need a total depth from the bottom of the pump bracket to the bottom of that of 11.5 inches. Plus we need the thickness of the gasket. I had that at an angle. So it looks like it actually needs to be right at 7. Measure 3 times, cut once. Right at 7. This is extremely hard plastic, so I think I'm actually going to have to saw, not cut with an X-Acto knife, because I don't think an X-Acto knife will actually even touch it. And we'll see if the magic scissors will actually do it. Look at that. One more measurement. Now that I've cut it off, it'd be terrible if it was too short. Okay, so I'm gonna have to want to bring it down right till I can see a little of that left. And the way you do this is you have to heat this hose up with the heat gun so that it's flexible enough to push onto here. I remembered the hose clamp. That's going to have to go this direction when it goes on there, because you clamp it to the side of the return line. While we're waiting for the heat gun to warm up, we'll put the protective sock rubber foam around the fuel pump. I'm just heating up the tube now so that it can be pliable enough to get the fuel pump onto it. Not quite enough. Probably just cooled too fast in this environment. There we go. Got that on there. I'm going to measure one more time. Just a hair. 11.5. Okay. Now I need to work on the orientation of the pump in the tank. And I noticed when I was in there before that the tank curves down from these valves this way. So I want to take this pump and rotate it so that the bulk of the pump is away from these inlets. And then the pickup will need to be rotated this direction. And I'm going to see if I can get my camera inside the fuel tank. And also I want to try to straighten out this tube is not square to this here, so I'm going to use the heat gun again. It was forced onto that fitting from the factory at a slight angle, so I'm just going to use the heat gun and straighten that out a little bit. There we go, I like that. And then the return line is going to be strapped to the side of this, but so it wants the depth of the tank minus 1 inch, so it wants that line at 10.5, but it wants it 45'd away from the pump. There we go. So that will 45 away from the pump. Now we're zip tying that to the pump. Put the hose clamp on. Okay. Looks like that unit is all ready to go. But, like I said, I want to do a test fitting in the tank. I'm going to see if I can get the flashlight and the camera down in the tank so that you can watch this go in. Well, it looks like it's got a pretty good fit in there to me. I couldn't get the camera in this hole to show, but it looks like it's sitting pretty nice, and it's right down touching the bottom on the curved side. Still got to get the wires up through the hole on this pump though. Okay, so now we need the pump wires. Okay, so those are in. Said in the instructions to just leave a little bit of slack in those. So we'll do that and then tighten those back down, and those weather seal. And those are a compression and have a rubber seal in them so that no gas can get up and follow the wires up. So it said just to take them down snug, not to over tighten. And that is snug. Okay, I'm going to stumble through sealing and installing these two units. should do it. Okay, phase 1 done. So the next step will be to install the 2 pipe fittings. Send in the return, and the return's going to be really close there. I might have to trim that. It's just there's no pressure on that side like there is on the send. So I might have to cut that one shorter. I'll get it in there all the way and see if I have enough room to get the hose on there. Okay, so I cut the other barb off a little shorter so I could get this in here for the return line. And I think that's going to be fine, but I want to do a test fit in the car, so I'm just getting the other vent line, or the other send line, or the supply line, fitting in. Because that's a relatively straight one. Not sure why they did it the way they did it, but this is a one size fits all fuel pump unit, so they just had to do the best they could on that, I'm sure. So hopefully that will clear without a problem. Otherwise I'll have to put in an adapter probably for a 45 and come off of there. I still might do that. I might have to go see what I can find in the way of a 45 adapter and see if that would actually turn in there. Yeah, I might have to check that out. I really don't like that, but it is what I've got. So, and I also need to see how long of wires I need for this. I'm going to have to extend the wires for the fuel pump out because the other plug sits in here somewhere that I have under there, but we're going to put this under the car and do a test fit on it. So I'm going to try to reposition the camera so that I can and light it under there so I can do a test fit and see if these lines are going to have any problem, because the other lines come in right about here. As you can see, it's pretty tight up in there, but there is room for both of those lines to come out. But I think I'm going to need to see if I can get that 45, because that's where the tank sits, right there. Pretty tight, but it is doable. Well, I think I've got the tank just about ready to go in. I had to do a little bit of moving stuff around. The return line was real close here, and I didn't like the way that the rubber came in with the barb pointing out this way, so I got a 45 and I had to do some grinding on it to get it to clear there, but it's just the return, so it's not high pressure, and I've got the thread sealed, so it's going to be just fine for the return. I'm capping off the vent on the fuel pump module here, and I'll use the vent over here to go up, and I'm going to place a rollover vent up near the gas intake behind the tail light on the 56. So at this point I have to extend the wires so that I can get them out to put a plug on them, but I'm just going to extend these wires and not put the plug on until I have it in. And the same thing with the fuel sending unit in the ground here. I'll put those wires on and just create a pigtail sticking out, and then I will attach those once the tank is in place so that I can get the lengths right. I just don't want a lot of extra wire in there to have to zip tie up and stuff. And I'll also put on a couple of pieces of fuel line and clamp those here. They're going to connect to the hard line somewhere over in here, but I just want to make sure I have plenty, so I'll put a extra length on there. But I can't get to these at all once the tank's in place, so that'll be I'll have to have everything hanging out ready to go up in there, and then the rest of the job will be on my back under the car. I have the tank ready to be put into the car now. I've gotten my wires for the fuel pump extended. I have to apologize that I did not have a 16 gauge in red and black, so I'm going to use pink and green because that's what I had the 16 gauge in handy, and it's only going to go about 4 more inches and go into a weather pack connector, but I'll do that after I get underneath there. I did not put zip ties back on here because I'm going to cut this one off, and I'm going to slide loom up here, a protective loom up on that as soon as I get the weather pack connector on. But this won't be accessible once I get this up into the car. And the same thing with the sending unit and the ground. I'll slide a piece of loom up that as well and clip off this once I get the weather pack connector on that end of that as well. But once it's up inside the car, it'll just make it a lot nicer installation and keep any chafing off of the wires at all. I've put on my hoses that'll come over here to the hard lines once this is up in place, and gotten the stainless steel hose clamps on those. And I've trimmed these. Most hose clamps come with quite a bit longer bolt on those, but I've trimmed those off. I don't want anything coming even close to touching anything. And I went ahead and capped off this vent, extra vent connection here, put a cap on it and put a clamp on it just as a precaution. That way there's, it's just all nice, tidy, neat package. And then I've got a cap on this vent temporarily while I'm putting it up into there, so I just don't knock any dirt or anything down into it. I still am concerned about this vent not being in a position that I'm favorable of for going up to the where the fuel filler neck. This just seems a very strange angle, but this is one that was put on there by Tanks Inc., so I'm hoping that they researched it, but I won't know for sure until I get that up in there and can see where it lands, because that's real close to the frame rail where this filler neck goes out and up to the tail light on the 56. There's been a little bit of trial and error with putting this gas tank in and out 3 times. What I've found is, first of all, the vent line had to come out and go in, or had to come out and be 45 so that it comes at the same angle as the filler neck, because otherwise it would go right up into the bottom of the body. So that was a flaw on their design part. And then had some problems with the way that the tubing came out. And the tubing came out, there is a brace in the floor right here. And that brace did not allow these pipes to come out of here and bend without kinking. So I had to put in brass 45s so that they would clear that, and then they'll come out over here below that brace that's right here. They can come out, and then they can come below that brace over to the hard lines. We'll see a follow-up of that once I get it up into the car, and then I connect it over to the hard lines that are going to come in over here. So that is where we're at. A lot of trial and error. You didn't need to see me cuss or hear me cussing. But now it's, I believe, ready to go back in for the final time. So we'll see. All right, now we're going to have a little update here. Here's where the filler tube goes in, and that's where the vent line is at for now. Going to do a little loop around here. Let's see if we can coordinate this. Okay, so now we have the lines coming out. Right up there. They will come out, come over here, and join into the hard lines. Right over here. Trying to get a better view here for you. There we go. So that's where the hard lines come in. There's the feed and the return. Then we'll have up there is the pump power and the fuel sending unit. But you can see how the 90s were needed to clear that brace there. And now they're going to line up with those feed and return lines really well over there. Okay. Go get a couple zip ties and some cutters. And yes, doing this on a creeper under a car 2 feet off the ground is a pain in the ass. Shoulders, neck, back, everything. Decide the best way to put these on because of the way that the tab comes out. You want to be able to cut it correctly. And that'll keep those from moving around at all. As I said, you put these on so that your cutters can cut them correctly, and these are flush cutters, so they cut flush to these and don't leave sharp edges. No sharp edges. Which half do those go into? Those go into this half. So there's an A and a B. So you have to make sure you're going to use A and B correctly on the other ones. I'm going to put positive into A, negative into B. And then get that in there, and we are all set. So that is going to be about there. This is going to be about here, so I'm not going to be too concerned with it. There we go. Okay. And remember, positive was A, which is right there. Negative B. And there we go. Positive, positive, negative, negative. Okay. In fact, that screw might actually work to put some kind of a keeper on there for these wires as well. So, and it's kind of contradictory on this because this is a ground to ground. That's what a speedometer or a fuel tank sending unit is you're just completing the circuit to ground through it. But I'm going to use A as the return. Well, I think my camera GoPro ran out of juice, so I'm going to see if I can do this with one hand. I have a new heavy-duty ground strap to put on for the tank primary ground. Like I say, I'm going to try to do this with one hand. See how talented I am. Okay, that one. And let's see here. There we go. I took too long of a break, and I think my GoPro ran out of juice. But what I decided to do was make a bracket that's going to go onto this same screw to tie these wires up. So instead of doing bare metal, I sandblasted a small piece of metal and painted it so it's drying. But I've now got the ground. There we go. Sending unit. One side is done. And if you don't have one of these little ratchets for putting screws in at 90-degree angles, I highly recommend one. And they're very cheap. There we go. Anyway, little bracket gave me something to tie to. So once I get these all wired up here, I can zip tie them to that bracket and hold them all in place. we go. And brown will go into the A side because that is the sending unit. So A side, brown. Almost did it wrong. B side, ground. Okay. And wiring. Now, next step on the wiring is to put loom around those wires going back. See how badly I could look. Feeding the loom onto the wires. Let's see here. I think that's pretty good. Feels like it's up against the back. So let's do a little bit of a guesstimation here. And then give it a little extra because it will squish a little. Okay. Hopefully there's no gas around here because just need to seal up the end of that loom so it doesn't unravel. There. I like it. The other was 1/8 inch, and this is 1/4. This is a little big, but at least it won't be tight. See, I maybe should have used it on that one, but I don't know. As long as I've got some protection on the wire. Okay. There we go. And now, zip tie all these wires up. That will work. Okay. I'm going to check my fittings. One more time. just thought of something. I need to turn on the key without the fuel pump connected and check the fuel sending unit. See what it shows when there's nothing in the tank. It's a little disappointing. The fuel gauge reads just above empty when there's nothing in it. Now it's time to see what happens if we apply power to the pump. We'll check, see if anything leaks up there. I don't see any leaks. Nothing visible, nothing dripping. That's a very good sign. Nothing around the fittings. At this point, I think we're done with the initial tank installation. I still have to work on a vent line for a rollover vent. And that is going to be project step number 2. There's no real reason to film it, because if you don't know how to move your axle, that's a whole other issue. But the axle had to be moved off of the perches and forward in order to get the gas tank out. So the next thing I'm going to do on this is, if you can see up in there, there is the vent comes out right next to the fuel filler, and I'm going to run a hose from that up to a rollover vent and put it up by the right above the filler cap. So the next step is to put the axle back in place so I can get this thing on the ground and test it. But I think everything's fine. I'm going to be adjusting the fuel pressure at the regulator up front. And that is over here where all of my fancy fuel lines and everything come up. It's a little hard to make out if you're not familiar with the underside of a 56 Chevy, but this is the filler neck for the gas tank. And I've found these really neat clamps. This is a 2-inch pipe, and I found these really neat clamps that I'm going to try to put this clamp around this pipe, which it should work. It's going to just take 2 hands, and I can't get in there till I jack the car up. This clamp will go around the pipe, as you can see here. I'll definitely be showing a different picture of it. But anyway, I'm going to clamp that around the pipe and make a bracket for the vent to be up here, up behind the filler, behind the taillight. But because the rollover vent has to be above the filler opening. So I do need to measure the angle of this pipe, which is not going to be real easy because we want it to sit straight up. So I'm going to try to get this camera which is magnetically mounted, so it's really difficult to get undone. Let's see if we can read the angle. I've set up a little jig here, and just to illustrate, this pipe is set up at an angle the same as what the filler tube of the gas filler is on the car, and I've given it approximately the same angle, in fact about 28 degrees, which is what it read under there. And so here are those brackets that I found online, and they're meant to be like for a Nerf bar or something to mount a light on, but I think it's going to work out really well because I can clamp one to the filler tube and then make a bracket to fit this vent tube. And I don't know if you know what a rollover vent tube is, but they're pretty much a safety requirement. But there's a little valve inside there. It's just a gravity ball bearing. When it goes upside down, it blocks that. So if the car rolls over, the gas won't leak out. This blocks it, but when it's in the upright position, it acts as a vent. So when you're filling, it'll actually let it release air as you're filling the gas tank. So they're, the old cars didn't have them on them, so this is a nice added feature to put on there. So what I need to do is make some sort of a bracket so that I can mount this up here, and it'll be above the filler neck input, where you fill your gas tank, and I want it to sit perfectly level. So I need to find a bracket I need to make a bracket that'll come off of this. And this will work on either side, whether I put it on this side or on this side. And I've got room there between the body panels and the filler neck, and I think I want to put it on this side. So I'm going to flip that around and make a bracket that'll go on there. I don't know if I can use this hole or not just to make it universal, but we'll have to see. Awfully big hole to fill up. I may have just found in my box of scrap perfect mounting bracket. I'll just have to open up the hole in this for this, but if I can bolt this through here, I can set it to the correct angle and then bolt this through here. I think that was too simple. So this turned out quick and easy just by using that angle bracket that I already had in my scrap metal box. I was able to mount the vent, put it at the right angle, and I'll just be able to take this under the car and clamp it onto the filler neck. Let's see if I can actually show. Yeah, so that'll put it level once I get it into the car. I was able to get my cell phone up in there and get a shot of a test fitting just to make sure everything was going to clear fine with that bracket that I made. Looks really good. The vent and clamp assembly is ready to go into the car now. So now I'm going to see if I can position the camera up into the tire well and get this in there and clamped on. I'm going to go ahead and get the screws started in this. Let's see if I snug up that screw just a little bit, then it'll hold itself kind of in place while I'm getting the other one started. And that's going to go up there as high as it can go and get it as straight as I can get it. Looks like right about there should do it. So the question becomes, how long does it take to make a 5mm socket for the end of a micro ratchet? About 10 minutes. many times do you use custom tools like that, right? Okay, that looks like that job is finished. Up there, everything's nice and snug. Okay, so now we just have to strap the tubing to the pipe. So let me see if I can position this again. And I want this to stay to the back side of this filler, because that's the side that the vent tube on the gas tank is on once I get around to that point. I think that's going to do it under here. Now I have to get the tire out of the way so I can get to the rest of the way over to the vent tube. I can't quite get to it from under here because it's on top of the frame. Hope I didn't cut it too short, then I'll have to cut it again. That actually looks just about perfect. Okay, so which way am I going to be able to get to the clamp from? Down here, I believe. So let's see if I can get in here to tighten it. Put one more zip tie on here. Keep that away from the body metal. Everything looks good now. I think I'll turn that just up to the top side of that vent tube. That way it gives it the highest amount of angle above the filler. And that is a completed project.